still to this day, 10 years in, hundreds of rental units later, there's still times I'm like, man, I need to know more. Because, if you can become a student of this thing called real estate, you're going to be very successful.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are getting some great value and getting the insights you need to scale your portfolio, let us hear about it. Give us some honest feedback, leave us a rating and review. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Stephen Andrews. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Stephen Andrews is a real estate investor, business coach, and author with nearly a decade's experience working in the real estate rental market. Now, he founded SOARX Consulting in 2023 to empower individuals to turn their real estate dreams into reality. Now, out of college, Stephen had $75,000 in debt, making only $45,000 a year. He knew he wanted more and needed something to change. Circling back to the dreams he once had while studying at High Point University, Stephen overcame his doubts and bought his first rental property. We're going to get more into Stephen's story in just a second. Let's welcome to the show, Stephen Andrews.
So glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen, great to have you on. I started to get into a little bit about your bio and your story here. Why don't you take 2 minutes and really fill in some of those gaps?
Absolutely. My journey, started over a decade ago. I grew up in an entrepreneur family. My parents were entrepreneurs and a landscaping business, and I went off to High Point University. I took a real estate class my senior year there, and just fell in love with real estate. My teacher was a adjunct professor from Chicago that owned rental property, owned investment properties and apartment complexes in Chicago. And so the whole purpose of the class was to virtually buy an apartment complex and make it profitable the first year. If you did that, you passed. If you didn't do that, you got a bad grade. And so I really kind of fell in love with it. And it took me several years before I actually pulled the trigger because I was afraid. Just like with anything new that you do, it's kind of hard to get yourself out of that comfort zone to have the courage to move forward. And for me, my journey was a little bit different. I was $75,000 in student loan debt, making $45,000 a year. So I didn't make a lot of money. And so I didn't have a lot of money left over at the end of the day. And I was like, there's no way I can even buy one property. But luckily, I got linked up with a local guy named Joel. He's my mentor to this day. And he really helped me understand that, you don't need a ton of money to get into this business. There's creative ways to do it. And so for me, I was able to pull that trigger. I was able to surround myself with people who knew far more than me. And fast forward 10 years, close to 300 units later, flipping multiple units a year, to loaning money, to now writing a book, to now trying to give back with SOARX Consulting. It's really kind of come full circle because I know I would not have had the success I have so far if it wasn't for the people I surrounded myself with, if it wasn't for the mentorship. Because they just help you get through the things that you don't know. And it's kind of that old saying, you don't know what you don't know. And so when you surround yourself with people that know far more than you, it just helps you out so much. And so super glad to be here today and looking forward to really diving in.
Yeah, you said some great things about your background. One, growing up in an entrepreneur family, you kind of had that exposure at an early age. The college you went to, you had this real estate class where your assignment was essentially to invest virtually in an apartment. I mean, man, I wish I had that kind of exposure in college. Like that's phenomenal to get kind of that firsthand experience while you're in school to really get kind of the wheels turning there. And then you talked about surrounding yourself with other people who were starting to invest and do other things. And by creating that network that really allowed you to feel comfortable moving more in that space. It's interesting because we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and investors who, if they grow up around real estate or they grow up in an entrepreneur family, I would say about maybe a third or half want to run from that and say, I don't want that experience. I want to do something else. And then, the rest of them obviously embrace it and say, hey, you know what? I want to kind of create a similar path. When you reflect back on kind of your childhood and upbringing and what it was like, being around parents who were entrepreneurial, how do you think that impacted your view on being an entrepreneur?
Absolutely made a huge impact. And so, my parents have been in business 30 years, and just seeing the drive that they had, they instilled that into me at a very young age. I still remember when I was in elementary school in the summertime, I didn't get to go just to the pool day in and day out and hang out with my friends. Most of the day I had to go help my parents, because they wanted to instill that drive. They wanted to instill a work ethic into me, and I'm so thankful. It's certainly when you're growing up, it's like, what, I just want to go hang out with my friends and enjoy my teenage years. But I'm so glad that I had that, and what they instilled in me, what being a business owner can do for you. But they also taught me the downside of being a business owner, right? It's not an 8 to 5 job. It's you work until the work's done. Um, at the end of the day, the butt stops with you. And so those valuable lessons, I'm like, what, that's really what I want to do. I don't want to have to work for someone else for 30, 40 years. I want to be able to grow and create a business that I can be proud of, and really, be able to grow wealth. And that's really what they taught me at a very, very young age. And I'm so thankful for really all of that they taught me, because it's just so valuable to see. But you're right, there are some people that don't want to do that. I knew I didn't want to be in landscape, and I can tell you that much. I was like, that's just very hard work. So it steered me in certain directions, but I still knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a business owner, because I just kind of fell in love with it. And plus, growing up, I don't know if you remember this computer game or not, but Roller Coaster Tycoon Lagoon,
Yeah.
where you can build
Yeah.
theme parks, and you had to make certain money to be able to continue to grow it. And it was just different games that I played as a kid were really kind of growing that entrepreneur mindset, and I didn't even know it in the moment, right? But that's the type of things that I thought was fun growing up.
No, I love that, man. And it's interesting too, because listening to you talk, when we reflect back on, our childhood and upbringing, it does impact so much of who we become as adults, right? And, for you, the positives were the hard work, the dedication, the sacrifice. But you also realize, man, that was really hard work. Like, I'm not trying to work that hard. Like, I don't mind working hard, but like there's a difference between that physical labor, being out in the sun for 12 hours and just thinking and strategically, right, and putting together the right business plan. And I think it's great to hear you say that, because I think, again, realize, hey, there's a lot that comes from being an entrepreneur that I like, but I don't necessarily want to be in that particular business. So great to hear you talk about that. Let's talk about real estate, right? We talked about the doubts you had before you bought that first rental property. Take us back to that moment.
Absolutely. I think anything new in life, whether it's real estate, whether it's another business, whether it's doing something personal that you're not accustomed to doing, it takes courage to take that first step. And, I know for me, I was $75,000 in student loan debt, $45,000 a year making an income. I still lived at home. I didn't make enough money to be able to even go afford an apartment. And so it was scary, because it's like, what if these are the questions that went through my mind? What if the units go vacant and I can't make the payment? A bank is you know, putting their neck out for a new investor, and what if I don't know how to fix this stuff up? And I mean, it's just so many different things, and that's just your mind playing doubts for you. If you can surround yourself with a mentor, if you can surround yourself and do the homework, you're going to feel so much better. And I know for me, I took a leap of faith, and I surrounded myself with someone that knew far more than me. He had 20, 30 years experience. He had hundreds of rental units, and he really taught me, hey, there's a very methodical way of doing this. And he taught me or told me to read a book called Building Wealth by Russell Whitney. Um, and it really outlines exactly how you grow a real estate business, whether it's single family homes or multifamily. It gave you the basics, and then he was able to reinforce that. And so, um, you know, it took some courage. From the time I talked to him to the time I bought my first property was about 6 months. So I was still scared. But he was there to kind of hold my hand and said, "Hey, you need to get in," because there's an old saying in real estate: the best time to buy real estate was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
but the second best time was buy today. And it just it comes full circle. Then when I was buying these properties, I was spending less than 100,000, and now when I spend 1 million, it doesn't even I don't blink an eye, right? But then spend 100,000. My goodness, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's just really life's a lot about perspective. Because you don't know what you don't know, and if you don't have that experience, then you just don't have that experience. But if you do the right things and take that first step, surround yourself with people know far more than you do, you can be very successful in this business.
You said a couple of things that were really insightful, but I need to clarify something. You mentioned that you were $75,000 in debt, making $45,000 a year, living at home. Did you buy that first investment property while still living at home?
I did.
So
I
let's
did.
let's
So
talk about that real quick because I think there are two things that jump out to me, right? One, and this may not be feasible for everyone, but making that investment while you're not even, a homeowner. I think that's a smart investment, right? I mean, for me, very similar. We started with a duplex, right? We were renters. We bought a duplex. We lived in one unit, rented out the other. The point was we were still making sacrifices on our own living situation while getting an investment property first. And so many people buy a house first. Well, now you've got this liability, you've got this asset, there's, this property you have to invest in and make a monthly payment to that isn't producing any income. And if you want to switch that, get out of debt, get some real passive income, get some money flowing, if you could sacrifice your own living situation just a little bit longer, get a rental property or investment property first, that's going to help. So that was the very first thing that stood out to me. The second thing you said, though, and I would say going back to that, some of our listeners are at a point where like that's just I've owned my house for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Like there's no way I'm going to be I'm not going back to that. However, we can also think about, well, how do we want to set our kids up? What are the things we want to instill in them? Like if they're getting ready to go off to college or, they're at that age, these are the kind of seeds we need to be planting and really almost forcing them to say, no, this is what you're going to do because this can set them up for a very prosperous future. So that insight is just a really powerful one. And to be honest, if we didn't do that, we're not talking today. I can't see us getting that confidence and momentum going if we didn't have that house hack as that first property. The second thing you talked about though was surround yourself with a mentor. You still had your doubts even after you were having these conversations. It took 6 months before you bought that first property. And the thing is, you're always going to have doubts. There's not a point where you're gonna say, "All right, I know everything there is to know about real estate investing. Let me go ahead and pull the trigger on my first deal." You will always have a doubt. Well, what if they don't pay rent? What if this happens? Well, who do I call if this happens? Like that's always going to be there. The key is surrounding yourself with the resources to have those answers. And a mentor is great because there's only so much Googling you can do, right? But if you can call somebody and say, hey, facing this issue, how should I handle it? That's going to be the easiest thing because this person is more than likely already faced all of those kind of issues. And if not, they're around long enough to know someone who has. So it's not about overcoming every doubt or trying to address every objection you can come up with in your head. It's about making sure you're resourceful enough to find those answers. And I just think that's really, really key for anyone trying to take that next step forward. You got to surround yourself with the right people, get that mentor, get the people on your team that can help you accelerate forward. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I think all those are key. And, a lot of people want to know, this is a question that I always get. Well, hey, you were $75,000 in student loan debt, making $45,000 a year. So how did you buy that first property? I used a credit card to pay for the down payment. And so I talk about this in the book, the New American Dream, book that I just released. There was a credit card. Now, credit cards 10 years ago was a little bit different than today. Interest rate was only 7% back in the day. You were able to get a cash advance, but I got creative. And so there's creative ways today that might not be a credit card, because credit card would be 20, 30%. But there's other ways that you can still, if you don't have your down payment, that you can still get in to have an investment property, have a rental property. And so don't allow that to be an excuse for you. There's plenty of creative ways, yeah, to get out there and to do that. And to your second point, the mentorship, you're right. Still to this day, 10 years in, hundreds of rental units later, there's still times I'm like, man, I need to know more. Because, if you can become a student of this thing called real estate, you're going to be very successful, because real estate changes. Real estate is not the same as what it was 10 years ago. It's not the same as what it was 2 years ago. It's just different. COVID and everything that took place during COVID has changed the way we operate. I used to have a brick and mortar building where everybody would come in and I'd let them pay cash, or I'd let them write a check. And I no longer have a brick and mortar building. We are a 100% virtual real estate company. And so my management company piece of it is 100% virtual. So nobody physically can come in and pay anything. We don't accept cash anymore. You have to pay through a tenant portal. And I mean, it's just evolved over time. And so
Yeah.
another thing that I would just say is be open to change, because real estate's going to change. The basics of real estate might not change. How you evaluate a property, your cash flow numbers, that sort of thing, that might not change. But how you operate it, how you manage it on a daily basis is certainly going to change. How you handle vendors over time will certainly change. And you'll just grow that way. You'll learn, like, what, I can't do this anymore. I can't do that anymore. The biggest thing for me, when I think about things that I've learned over the years is, I trust but verify, right? So you're going to have vendors that say, oh, yeah, I went and fixed this. Well, you can trust that they're telling you the truth, but you need to go verify before you pay them. Just don't take their word for it, because there are people, unfortunately, out there that will take advantage of that situation, or think that they actually got everything done, but they're human too, and they overlooked something. And so it's very hard to get a vendor back out there once you've paid them for the job. And so, it's just things like that you learn over time. And you know what? I talk about that stuff in the book, but sometimes you got to have that real life experience as well.
No, I love it. I think those are great examples, understanding just, one, the creativity that it takes sometimes, the ingenuity to find the capital necessary, especially starting out, because that's the hardest time, right? When you have the least amount of money. So to figure out how to be creative to get the funds necessary to make those initial investments, but then how to scale, how to grow, how to operate them, all that will evolve over time. Speaking of evolving over time, over the last decade or so, you've been able to scale your portfolio, now owning and managing hundreds of properties. Talk to us about some of the things you've learned or implemented along the way to scale that portfolio.
Absolutely. So I learned this technique when I read that first book that Joel told me to read, Building Wealth by Russell Whitney. And really, the technique that I've used: buy the worst house on the block, or buy the worst apartment complex on the block, or buy the worst duplex on the block. You never want to buy the best, because there's not as much upside. So someone else has done all the work. Someone else is going to make the money when they sell it. And there's no sweat equity that you can actually put into that property. And so I tell people, you want to create value for the community in which you have properties in. And so the best way to do that is buy the worst, go in, fix it up, and turn around and refinance and pull your sweat equity back out and roll that into the next property. Doesn't matter what kind of properties you have. You could have all duplexes, you can have all triplexes, all multifamily, all single family. It works all the same. And so I tell people, make sure you don't take that loan money and go buy a nice Corvette, or go buy a nice shiny boat, depreciating asset. You're going to be in a terrible position down the road if that's what you do. But if you use your hard-earned time and sweat equity and money and roll that into the next property, you can really scale it, because it's kind of like dominoes. Once they start to fall, they all fall, right? And so it takes some time, right? You just say, for me, I bought two properties side by side, and then I did the same thing too. They were the worst on the block. I went in. It was all cosmetic stuff that needed to be done. There was no structural issues. And I would say, if you're a new investor, stay away from structural issues. You just don't have the experience to handle that stuff. Be more conservative with that. but go in and fix what you need to fix and turn around, refinance and pull your sweat equity back out and roll it to the next property. And so now what you're using bank money, right? So you're no longer using personal money to get you in. You're using bank money that they just loaned on, and now you're rolling it to the next property. And that's how I was able to scale. I mean, for years, there was one year I bought 50 properties or 50 units in one year. And people say, how in the world did you do that? And I did it exactly how I just said I did. It's that simple. And people are like, well, that's just too simple of a plan, like for you to really be able to do that. And I was like, well, real estate at its core is a very simple concept, that people have used for years. But people are making it a lot more complicated today than what I think it needs to be at times. And so that's really how you can certainly scale and not have any money. I mean, I tell people that I don't have a dime of my own money tied up in any of this real estate because my first down payment was an advance off a credit card that I ended up paying back, but I didn't have any of my own personal money that I actually put into it. I used bank money, and I've just been able to do that over the years. And it's such a great, fascinating thing is to see it evolve and to see it to grow. And when you have 5 or 10 units, you certainly manage that way different than when you have 100 units. And when you have 100 units compared to 200 units, you manage it different. And so it's just an evolving thing over time, and that's the fascinating thing for me.
Yeah, I love to hear that. You talked about kind of the scaling and the snowball effect of being able to, buy a property, renovate it, refinance, take that equity, buy another property, and do the same thing. And if you're doing this play over and over, at a certain point, even if you do start with your own money, you can take your money out and you're good. Basically playing with house money at this point, and that allows you to really scale and grow a portfolio. Just for context, I mean, at what point did you really see it start to ramp up where it's like, okay, hey, I mean, you mentioned buying 50 houses or 50 properties in one year, but like at what point were you like, okay, this is really the inflection point?
It was a couple years in, so when you first start doing that, I always tell people make sure you have multiple different avenues for financing. Don't just have one avenue for financing because they might have to tell you no. And it might have nothing to do with you. And certainly I experienced that early on. I had one banker that said, hey, we've already reached our max for this type of property in our portfolio. Come see us next year. I've had a banker say, you know what, I need you to slow down a little bit. This was maybe 2 years in. I had bought 10 properties that year, 10 units that year. And they said, we'd really like for you just to sit on those properties and not buy anything else. And I'm thinking in my mind, well, I didn't tell you to how to run your bank. I certainly don't want to slow down. I feel like I've surrounded myself. I feel like I'm doing certain things right, and so I want to continue to grow. And that's why you have multiple avenues where one banker or one financial institution is telling you no, you can go to the next one. And
Yeah.
so, because it takes you years to get that credibility because you got to keep in mind that a lot of people that are in this business right now was also a part of '07, '08, '09. And so that's still in the back of their mind. Hey, new investor, and you know what? We want them to be conservative, and we don't want a repeat of that. And so fully understand, why they think that. And so you just want to be methodical about it. But I would say a couple years in, you really start getting that credibility from financial institutions that really allow you to really start to grow even faster. It also gets your name out there. So I was telling any and everybody that I could tell that knew about properties that were for sale, whether it's realtors, whether it's people off market deals, whether it's other landlords. I told them, hey, I want to get in this business, and if you have anything that this is what I'm looking for, X, Y, and Z. If you have anything in that, give me a call. And that has just I've done that every year, and so that's just snowballed. I get 5 calls a week. Hey, do you want this deal? And it's just that network that I've created over the years between bankers and between other people that are selling properties. I even have banks that will call me and say, hey, this person is having trouble with their loan. Do you want to buy these properties? And so now banks are looking to me to say, hey, you know what? Can you help bail us out? You've been a good customer for us, and do you want to buy these properties? Does it make sense? And so you'll start to see that evolve over years. But you got to do the right things from day one, and you've got to do the right things every day because it all builds on itself. If you lose credibility year one, you won't have very much success. It's so hard to restore that credibility, once you've lost it.
I love that last point about building and maintaining that credibility. I think it also ties back to making sure you start off on a good foot, having the right people around you, right? If you start off by yourself and make a mistake, it's not just the money or the mistake on that deal, it's the reputation, which can be really difficult to overcome, especially on that first deal. So if you have the right people around you, they're going to help steer you in the right direction, allowing you to build that credibility, which just opens up doors. The other thing you talked about was this is a relationship business, and we hear that all the time. But the way you're explaining it is when you have a lender relationship, they're going to want to work with you, right? They may have their own reservations because lenders are, by their nature, they're concerned, right? They're going to be risk averse. So if you start scaling too fast, they're going to say, "Whoa, whoa, we've seen this before. We know somebody who did that and lost money." So they're not going to want to do that. So you definitely need to broaden those relationships, but it works both ways. When you build that credibility, they may come to you and say, "Hey, we've got a deal that, we're either going to lose, this group's going to lose, or that they're in trouble, they need to sell it. Are you interested?" And that is a great way for you to build your deal flow, not just with banks and lenders, but other investors, brokers, agents, other folks in the industry. So really making sure that you're connecting with other people, building your credibility, maintaining these relationships, that's going to help you scale and grow your portfolio. Stephen, we talked a little bit about the book you've written, right? So let's talk more about that. The New American Dream, a simple roadmap to purchasing investment properties. What can readers find if they check out this book?
Absolutely. You find everything that I've learned over the last 10 years. And it's just a great reverse, different platform, within the book that really outlines, in the first chapter, what's first things first, how should you create an LLC? How do you protect yourself, to making sure you have the insurance, making sure you have authentic relationships, to financing, to maintenance, to property management, to preparing yourself for the unthinkable, and everything in between. It is really everything I've thought about over the last 10 years that I wish I would have 100% knew up front. And so it's just such a great book. There's no fluff. I'm a no fluff guy. I would much rather just get to the point and give me the information that I need. And that's what this is about. And, speaking of banking relationships, it has financing in there. It talks about the different type of financing you can have, but then it also talks about authentic relationships and how you build them, to how you handle maintenance, and how do you handle the rental process, because all of that is so pivotal for you to be successful in this business. And it even gets you thinking about the unthinkable, because that's really why, one of the reasons why I wrote the book. During the pandemic, I had a ton of realtors, a ton of investors saying that there's so many new investors that want to get in this business, and they don't know which way to go. There's not a ton of mentorship out there, that they're looking for. And so that's the reason why I wrote it, but during that, the unthinkable was happening, and nobody thought that this country would shut down for 2 years. I still remember I was at the ACC tournament in Greensboro, and there was a rumor going around, "Hey, you know what? The tournament's going to be canceled." But there's no way this tournament's going to be, because it's just too much money involved, right? But you know what? It did. And then, it just all dominoed over the next several years. And COVID was a tough time for a lot of investors. But it takes a step further there. I talk about, I've had house fires before, where somebody left a candle burning and it ended up burning the unit. And I've even had, unfortunately, a tenant pass away in a house fire, because they couldn't get out due to smoke ventilation. And it's just things that you don't think about when you first get in this business. It's like, well, that's not going to happen to me mentality, but it can. And so you have to prepare yourself. And so it even goes in the book of telling you to outline different scenarios and how you would handle those scenarios, because it's much better to think about those scenarios before you actually get into it, because when you get into it, you're emotional. So when you're emotional, you don't make very good decisions. And so when you already have some stuff outlined on how you would handle certain situations, it helps you navigate those situations so much better. And then the book ends with when's enough enough, and my consulting business, SOARX, it's all capital for a reason, because it's not about where you start, it's not about where you finish, but it's about the journey in between. And so that chapter's, really about, if you're going to chase the ghost, right? Because, if you have X marks the spot where you want to be, I promise you, when you get to X marks the spot, you're going to want something else, because I was the same way. I only wanted 10 rental units. I just wanted some secondary income. And so that was my initial mindset. And then fast forward 10 years, my goodness, 30 times, 10, 300 units. And so you have to start thinking about what's important in life. And, because this business can also be very consuming. I tell people it's almost like a drug. It's just so fun for me, where you kind of just get attached to it. And it's like, you know what, I just want more and more and more. And so you really have to think about what your goals really are and what you really want out of this, so it doesn't consume you either, because there is more to life than just real estate or whatever job, that you have. For me, I do all this so I can do things with my family and friends and enjoy those priceless things in life that money can't buy. Certainly money can buy you time, but money doesn't buy happiness at all. You got to be happy with yourself, and money can support it, but it certainly can't be the driving factor.
Yeah, I love it. Appreciate you sharing that feedback. And again, for folks who want to check out the book, it's The New American Dream: A Simple Roadmap to Purchasing Investment Properties. And they can also learn more at your website, SOARXconsulting.com. Great information, Stephen. Right now, we are going to transition to our round of insights. Stephen, give us a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Absolutely. I think one of the first deals that I did, the maintenance piece, and I go over this much more detail in the book, but, there was maintenance pieces that I trusted, but I didn't verify my maintenance workers or the vendors that were doing work. And one comes to mind. There was some LVP flooring, which was luxury flooring plank, that I was using in one of the rental properties, and they didn't install it right. And so I didn't go verify what they were telling me. I just trusted that hey, this is a legitimate company and they're telling me the truth and they got a good reputation. And my goodness, that was a couple $1,000 mistake. And so when you're early in this business, it's like, a couple $1,000 is a lot of money. Even to this day, even with what I have, I don't want to waste a couple $1,000. And so to me, I felt, what, this is just a failure, but I think so differently about failures now. It's only a failure if you don't learn from it, if you don't move past it, if you don't do something about it. And so for me now, I have things in place because of that issue that, we don't pay an invoice until we go, look at it, verify it's right. And so, I just encourage people to learn from the mistakes they have. And don't let that one mistake define you, but let that one mistake help you in the future.
Love that. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Absolutely. We just went to virtual. Everything's done online. There's so many great rental management softwares out there. For me, I didn't want to spend thousands of dollars on one. I use a company called Rent Ready. It's a landlord out of New York that designed this, and he said, you know what, I wanted to design something because I felt like there was just pieces missing, and it's just so easy. It's inexpensive. My tenants love it. If you want to take a step further and let them manage your maintenance stuff, that's also an option. So depending on how passive you want to be, but I would certainly look in to having a good digital software that helps you manage your rental property. Because I had the mindset when I first got into this, like, you know what, I don't want to spend a little bit more money for anything like that. But now the way I leverage this software, it's almost like having multiple employees, because it sends rent reminders constantly. It keeps track of late fees. I mean, it keeps track of everything. And so I'm actually spending less time on that now, My managers are spending less time on that because we invested in that software.
Love it. All right, give me a book. I'm sorry. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Well, outside of my own book, The New American Dream, I've also told absolutely everybody about the first book I've ever read. Now, I mentioned it earlier, Building Wealth by Russell Whitney. This book was originally done in the 90s and then it was redone in the 2000s, but it's still got great information and it still makes sense to this day. When I read that book, it taught me how to do exactly what I did to scale. It tells you the things to look out for. It tells you to trust but verify, to be involved, but it also tells you exactly how to buy the worst house on the block, fix it up, have a sweat equity, turn around, refinance it, and roll it to the next property. And so it's been so instrumental in my success.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
That's a good one. Be organized. And so, you know, with the big company that I had, even if I scaled that back to when I was first getting started, if you don't have some sort of calendar, if you don't write down your tasks that you have that day, you're going to forget something. And so I had to learn that the hard way. I said, you know what, I'm in my mid 20s and upper 20s, and you know what, my mind feels sharp. I don't need to write anything down. And what I was doing, I was forgetting things. And so now I have a daily habit of making sure I'm doing this for myself, trust but verify, right? So I want to make sure I have everything that wrote down on a list or in my calendar that I need for that day to make sure I'm hitting all the tasks I need to hit. Because if you don't know what task you need to do, you can't execute. And so I would really highly recommend making sure you're organized and making sure that you have some sort of list of things that you need to do on a daily basis. And then I would take that a step further. If there's stuff you need to do weekly, monthly, and yearly, also go on and outline that so you don't forget about something. Because when you're in the daily grind, whether or not you're doing this as full-time or more passive, there's other things in life you want to do. And so you want to be organized so you're productive as possible.
Give me your number one insight for scaling a real estate portfolio.
I would do it as conservative as you can. And what I mean by that is don't just go buy things to say, you know what, I own rental property. So I've had a lot of different people that I've known that, you know what, I want to get to 10 rentals, but they only make $100 per rental. And so they're not making any money. And so sometimes they're losing money. And so when you're scaling, you want to make sure that you're evaluating these properties conservatively, because in a great market, rental properties are going to make money. But you got to make sure they make money in a down market or a market where, things might have went wrong. For instance, nobody thought COVID was going to happen. But since I, evaluated all my properties conservatively, I was still okay during COVID, where a lot of people that I know was asking banks like, hey, can I just pay the interest only, making interest only payments because, they were struggling because there wasn't enough margin or they didn't run the numbers. And I think one of the things that you start doing is, when you're scaling, hey, I just want to get to X number as fast as I can. And you got to understand this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so you want to do your due diligence and make sure it's right because, this isn't a girlfriend you're going to be dating. This is somebody you're marrying. Right. So you can't just break up with the house overnight. You'd have to sell it. You'd have to, maybe pay off a loan. So you're kind of set in, once you buy this property. And so you want to make sure you do your due diligence right and do it very methodically over time.
All right. You are in Elon, North Carolina. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Man, there's so many good ones. There's one here in the Elon area called the Cutting Board. It's been around. It's been a staple here in Alamance County for years, probably 60, 70 years. And, they got some of the best grilled chicken and best steaks and the best salad bar in North Carolina, I think. And it's just great.
Sounds like a great option. We'll make sure you put the link to that in our show notes. Stephen, you gave us some great feedback, just listening to your story, coming in from, an entrepreneur family, realizing that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, maybe not exactly a landscaper, but you wanted to be an entrepreneur, going to college, taking that initial course, getting your feet wet, getting that initial mentor, buying that first rental property, using credit cards, and then scaling that portfolio and learning different things along the way. Now you own and manage over, hundreds of units, think around 300 units or so. You've written this new book, The New American Dream, which again, we'll link to in our show notes. You're helping other investors learn how to scale a portfolio. Again, if you want to learn more about Steven and his company, you can go to SOARXconsulting.com with the link in our show notes as well. Steven, I just want to thank you again for being a great guest, coming on Multifamily Insights, and we hope you have a great day.